Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session. We've got the amazing writer who's going to introduce herself and tell us about. And what I was particularly taken about this writer for this session is that she claims to be a cyborg as well, and that is on her website. So please introduce yourself and tell us about this cyborg thing.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jenna Moreci. I am an Amazon bestselling and award-winning romantasy author and writing craft author. I'm also a YouTuber over at Writing with Jenna Moreci. And Cyborg was actually my nickname in college because people saw me as kind of tough and no nonsense, and none of my friends ever saw me cry. And they're like, Jenna's but she's not a human, she's a cyborg. And it just turned out I was actually autistic, but they were like, no, she's a cyborg. So that's where it came from.
Oh, that's really interesting. I know that many of us are challenged in one way or another for our process of writing and how we do things. So tell me about your journey. How did you come after college? How did it start for you?
Well, I've wanted to be a writer my whole life. It's been my lifelong passion ever since literally the first grade. But like a lot of, and I pursued it growing up, when I was a kid, I was constantly writing stories. But like a lot of people, especially having grown up in the 90s, you hear a lot of people like, oh, you're not going to make any money as a writer. It's not a profitable career. So I did the quote unquote smart thing and the safe thing. And I got a degree in finance. And I actually, after college, was working as a stockbroker, which is so much like writing. It's pretty much the exact same thing. No, I'm just kidding. It was awful. And I just remember working this job, and yeah, it was safe and reliable and everything, but I hated it. I couldn't stand it. And I remember thinking, well, I'll just find a new job. And I looked at the other jobs that were in my field, and I'm like, I don't want any of these jobs either, and this is just going to be my future. I was only in my 20s. I was like, I'm going to be stuck doing this for the rest of my life, just pursuing something that I can't stand. And so I decided I've always wanted to be a writer. I'll just try it out on the side and give it a shot. I'll do it while I'm working full time, and we'll just see how it goes. And the way I saw it was, if it doesn't work out, I can at least say I tried. And if it does work out, it could be a lucrative hobby. That's how I saw it. I never thought it would end up being my full-time job. But fast forwarding years later, I was writing my debut novel. Unfortunately, my then boyfriend, now husband, suffered a major fall and broke his spine. And I quit my job and signed on to be his caregiver. And while I was his caregiver, as he started to heal and recover and relearn to walk, I started having extra time on my hands, and my book was ready to be released. And I thought, you know what? Let me start building a platform for this. And people had been recommending YouTube to me. So I decided to give it a shot. I thought my goal is 100 subscribers. If I get 100, I'll feel like I really hit the jackpot. And almost 300,000 subscribers later, the rest is history. Basically, the channel took off. I was able to release my debut novel and multiple novels since then. And because I had built this large audience, I was able to make writing my full-time job pretty much right away. And it is now officially more lucrative than that quote unquote safe job in finance. So here's to proving everyone wrong.
That's amazing. That really is amazing. And congratulations, Jenna. That is really just a powerful story. And I think it's something also about how we can turn what appears to be a setback or what appears to be a disaster, the challenge your boyfriend went through, what appears to be something difficult can actually turn out to open a new door and to create new opportunities for us. I've seen that as well. So
Mhm.
that's really wonderful. So tell us about a little bit about the books and the book that seems to have resonated most with your readers.
Well, I kind of go into two different categories. I write romance and romantasy, and I write writing craft books, which are to help other authors on their journey. And the series that kind of launched me and turned me into a six-figure author was the Savior series, which is a dark fantasy romance. And it follows, this young man who enters a gladiatorial tournament to sort of win the heart of this magical queen, but he ends up entering the tournament. He doesn't like this queen. She kind of sucks. She's mean. He's starting to learn that basically everything he's learned about his realm is a lie. The political system is very corrupt, and he ends up falling in love with someone else, a healer who works at the palace. And now he's trying to get out of this tournament, but he's not only trying to save his own life, he's trying to save the life of the woman he loves. And so that was sort of the first book I wrote where it was very much a passion project. I wrote exactly the kind of book I wanted to read, which is can be scary for a lot of writers. But I'm living proof that, write the book you want to read, there will be an audience for it, because I didn't really go into it, thinking like a lot of writers go into this, their writing process thinking, oh, what are people going to think? What's my mom going to think? Or is this going to be cool? Or is this going to make me look silly? A lot of people have those fears when they're writing. I just ditched all of that and was like, this is the kind of story that I want to read. I'm not finding it on the shelves, and I wrote it, and it blew up, and it got me to where I'm at today. And because of the success of that series, I was asked to write my nonfiction writing craft book that's coming out in October, which is How to Write Romantasy, where I walk other authors through the step-by-step process of writing a romantasy novel that is really marketable and that will really catch readers' eyes.
I think that's brilliant. And one of the things I notice, of course, and I've seen the latest statistics, is that romantasy and romance in general is eating the book market, okay, which is now 60, 70% of the whole book market is romance and romantasy. So I think to be part of that is a wonderful thing. And to help other writers to be part of that, to be part of this huge growing genre which people really enjoy the entertainment of it and the ability for it to take us out of our lives and take us somewhere good. That's really important. So the book, and I think you've written another book, and you help people a lot with their writing journey. I've seen your YouTube videos and very detailed about dialogue and character and other things. Tell us about all of that, how that has resonated with people.
Well, when I first started the channel, it was funny because I had a blog and I was just kind of giving writing advice on the blog. And a lot of people who knew me personally and followed the blog was like, you should make YouTube videos. You have the personality for that. And I'm like a lot of writers. I'm like, absolutely not. I'm an introvert. I don't want to put my face on the internet. But then after my husband broke his spine, you sort of have a shift in how you think about the world. You go through something like that, it reminds you like we're not here for, like our time isn't guaranteed. Like we could be gone at any moment, so you might as well kind of risk it for the biscuit. So that's why I ended up starting the YouTube channel. My whole thought process, like I said, I didn't expect to get any followers. I was hoping for 100, and my thought process was, let me try and help people avoid the mistakes that I've made. Let's just kind of, I guess, cut the crap, so to speak, and just get to like the nitty gritty. Because even when I was finding writing craft books, a lot of it felt very fluffy and almost like some of the authors were just sort of, puffing up their ego rather than just getting to the point and giving the facts and the step-by-step formulas for things. So that was sort of my thought process behind the channel, is that I was just going to lay out all the steps. I was going to, get rid of all the fluff and just keep things very straightforward and easy to digest so that people of any, level of expertise could understand. And it was crazy because the first 6 months of the channel, it was just kind of like touch and go. And then, and I had been trying very hard to be very professional on the channel and to be very cordial. And I got to a point where I was like, no one's really watching this, so I'm just going to be myself. And by nature, I'm pretty blunt. I'm very straightforward. I can have a bit of a potty mouth. And I started being, that version of myself, the real Jenna. And that's when my channel skyrocketed. So I think that what really resonated with people is the authenticity, the fact that I'm a real person talking to, my audience. And, I'm not sugarcoating things. I'm not, changing my personality. People can really tell when someone's being phony. And so I think that's what resonated with my audience, along with the fact that, at the time when I first started my channel, there were no other writing channels out there. I found two really small channels at the time. So, people were really looking for this writing advice and they were having a really hard time finding it. And so I was like, here you go. Here are all the secrets that I learned. You can have them. So it's been super fun.
That's really good. Do you not wonder, or do you not get scared that if you start ranting about something, that if you start, going on about something, that all the darkest things and your gripes about things and your hatreds of this or that, that'll all start coming out instead? What do you think? Do you worry about that at all?
I think that there are a lot of YouTube channels that are focused on like the 10 things I hate, and like every channel is just every video is the stuff they hate. It's complaints. And the reason that a lot of channels do that is because those are the videos that get the most views. If you look at my channel, the videos that have the most views are worst tropes, worst ways to start a chapter. It's just the unfortunate reality is people love to hear other people complain. It was always really important to me that my channel never become that place. So I was very cognizant of the fact that if I'm going to be releasing 4 videos a month, one of them can be complaints and the rest have to be something else, whether it's unboxing or whether it's saying like the best ways to start a chapter or just giving advice on dialogue. I didn't want every single video to be like this big old bash or negativity rant. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to help people learn. So I do tell people like these are the worst ways to write a book, but it's less my opinion and more this is what the data suggests. And then when I do give opinions, it's stuff about like tropes. That's a personal opinion. Like there technically are no bad or good tropes. There's just tropes people like and tropes that people don't like. And so that's when I go into my own personal opinions. And of course, there are people who disagree, and that's fine. They can read different books than me. But I just try to make sure it doesn't overwhelm the channel because I don't want it to be like a negative space. We're allowed to vent and talk about books we don't like or, things that we don't like in the writing industry, but it shouldn't be what the channel revolves around.
Yeah, I was attracted to the worst tropes videos. I didn't watch them. I didn't have a lot of time, but I was attracted to those. So I can feel that appeal of the worst tropes and the worst ways to start a story. So tell us, what are, just very briefly, I know this is pandering to our obsessions, right? But tell us a little bit about. Just give us a glimpse of a worst trope or a worst way to start a story.
Well, again, this is just my opinion. People can disagree. But one of my least favorite tropes is called fridging a woman, which is where there's a female character who gets very little page time. We don't ever really get to know her as a person. She's usually married to the main male character, and she ends up dying solely for the purpose of fueling him to become a hero. So the reason that this trope is widely disliked, besides just me, is it's because it kind of reduces a female character to just being an object that makes a male character, become a hero. She doesn't really have any purpose outside of that. I kill lots of characters in my books. I kill male and female characters. I think it's totally fine to do that. But can give the character a little, personality, give them a little purpose, and I try not to make it, I try not to follow that specific path of, oh, well, she was just here to die. She looked hot. She was on the page for, one chapter, and now she's dead and buried so that he can go become the next superhero, And that's something that we see a lot. If you look at a lot of, especially action stories, that's usually the trope behind it. Another trope I don't like, and this is a really popular one. So I get a lot of pushback on it, and it's fine. You guys can read the books. It's just not for me. I don't like the alpha douche. I don't like the romances where the main male character is described as an alpha and he's just kind of a jerk, and the female character's like, I can fix him. I'm like, I don't have time to fix anyone. I want to read about a nice guy who like is sweet. So those are two tropes that I'm not crazy about.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That's great, really good. What I found in crime was that obvious trope of the woman being murdered at the beginning, kidnapped or murdered. It always had to be a woman who is murdered, is especially a young woman who is either kidnapped, murdered, or something happens to her. Something horrible, particularly they started getting into more grotesque, horrible things happening to women, which I thought was just like phenomenally anti-feminist and of male pandering to sort of male, but a lot of people like novels with those sort of tropes in them, with the things that we think Oh my God, that's a horrible thing, to always have a woman dying or a woman killed at the top. What do you think about that clash between trying to get our art right and trying to get the market right, trying to make sure that our books are appropriate for the market, that people will like our books and will sell a lot?
I think what a lot of people forget is because sometimes people will hear things like the fridging a woman trope, and they'll be like, well, I can't write anything. And I have to remind them, well, do you have other women in the book? And they're like, well, yeah, I've got five other women in the book. I'm like, do they have personalities? Are they contributing to the story? Are they intelligent? Do they have depth? And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, then it's not really a problem if you killed one woman because you've got five other great characters. It's a problem when the only representation for that group has no personality, no character depth, and they're dead. So, like for example, another trope that a lot of people consider problematic is called bury your gays, which is where you only have one or two gay characters in the book and they both die pretty much, and usually it's they fall in love and then they're punished for their love by getting killed. And that's another thing where people will be like, well, I have this gay character, but they have to die. It's like, well, do you have other queer characters in the book? And they're like, yeah, I've got loads. So half the time they're like, this is queer fiction. All the characters are queer. And it's like, well, if that's the case, then it's not really that big of a deal, especially if the book calls for death. So I think when people get worried about this sort of thing, it's great because it means that they're cognizant of their audience and they care and they don't want to do harm. So it's a good thing that they're aware of that. But a lot of the times, it's just about taking your audience into consideration, remembering that this is a big world with lots of different kinds of people, different body types, different ethnicities, different sexual orientations, different genders, and reflecting that in the story. And so if certain characters are evil and bad things happen to certain characters, it's that's usually a natural part of storytelling because conflict is a natural part of storytelling. But if you've got this big melting pot of characters in your book, you're going to run less of a risk of running into a problem like this. Usually these problems occur. Another terrible trope is the token black character, where there's only one black character in the book. If you have multiple black characters in the book, then you don't have a token character. So it's just about making sure that your characters in your book are reflective of the world at large. And then it's a lot easier to avoid these problems. And as always, enlist critique partners, enlist beta readers, talk to your editors, talk to professionals who know more about this stuff than you, and just be able to listen to them and hear what they have to say. Because we're all gonna make mistakes no matter what. And sometimes it just takes that outside voice to be like, hey, I don't know if you noticed, but you did this thing and that's problematic. And you're like, oh, I had no idea. Thank you for telling me. I'll fix that.
Moving on to themes, do you have an overall theme when you're writing a novel? Do you have an arc, a theme to your book where you want to get across some particular point, or do you let it evolve, or do you search for it as you go? How do you deal with the idea of the theme, which is supposedly the underlying idea of the book and the book is talking about, which can inhabit all parts of the book? So, what do you do about theme?
I usually have an underlying theme that I'm trying to get across in the book, but when it comes to the characters' individual arcs, like how the characters grow through the story, that's something that I like to figure out as the story progresses. So when I'm outlining the novel, I like to make sure that the theme is being present, but how my characters sort of react to certain situations. For example, in The Savior's Champion, the first book of my Romantasy series, there's a scene where my main character has his first kill. So he's never killed anyone before, and he's forced to kill a man in this arena, while spectators are watching. And I knew he was going to kill the man, but I hadn't decided how he was going to feel about it afterward. So I give myself that wiggle room so that once I get to that scene and I've gotten to know Tobias, the character, better, then I decide, okay, how does he feel about that? Is he really broken up about it? Does he feel really guilty? And when I got to that scene, I realized, actually, I think Tobias is going to be surprised by how not guilty he feels. And he's going to feel bad about the fact that he doesn't feel bad. And that wasn't something that I had anticipated when I first outlined the novel. So I know what the story overall, the theme like that I'm trying to portray, but it's the characters' individual emotional journeys that I like to sort of discover along the way.
You mentioned about your outline. How big of an outline do you do for this story? Is it one page or 20
Oh,
pages?
my outlines are really detailed, but that's also because I usually come up, as a romance writer, there's lots of banter. I usually come up with dialogue while I'm in the idea phase, and I like to just make sure I get it all written down. So I will have entire conversations between the characters already planned out before I go to write, chapter 10 or 11, and I just shove that conversation in that place in the outline so that when I get to chapter 10, I know, okay, this is what they're going to say, and then I, add it to the scene. So my outlines can be 20 pages long, but if you take out all the dialogue that I came up with ahead of time, it's probably half the length.
So when you're looking at the outline, do you have particular plot structures? You know, the journey, and various other, the tragedy and various other. Do you have a sort of an outline for the whole plot itself? So how it's going to work out?
I think this is something that a lot of writers do. Once you've been writing for a while, you sort of end up having sort of like your own structure memorized, and it can be like bits and pieces of existing structure. So my structure has some similarities to Save the Cat, but it's not identical to that. And it's sort of, obviously it follows Freytag's pyramid. And so in my first writing craft book, Shut Up and Write the Book, I break down the different structural options that writers have, or the most common ones. And then I go, this is my personal structural method. These are the steps that I usually follow when I'm outlining a novel. You can follow it too if you want, or you can use this as inspiration to create your own structural method. But I just sort of present my structure to give people an idea of this is what works for me. It might work for you. It might not work for you, or it might inspire you to sort of create your own that works for your genre.
So you have one book already out on writing craft, and you've another one coming. So tell us about the book that's already out that people can buy, and about the second book.
So the first one is Shut Up and Write the Book. That was my first writing craft book, and it's basically a step-by-step guide to the overall writing process. So it starts with coming up with an idea. It starts with if you're struggling to get ideas, what you can do to help, get your creative juices flowing. It starts with what to do if you have too many ideas and you don't know which one to pick. And it goes all the way through the professional edit. So I sort of break it down as much of a step-by-step process as I can, because as we know, the writing process can kind of jump around. But I try to follow it. Yeah, step by step. I go over outlining. I let people know, hey, not everyone outlines, so if you want to skip this, you can. I go over the drafting process. The different edits and critiques that you should do yourself, when you should enlist help from beta readers and critique partners, all that stuff. I left no stone unturned. And the idea, again, was to make it accessible to newbie writers as well as seasoned writers who maybe are kind of in a funk and they're kind of stuck in their process and they want to see if, maybe they can expand their process. And then the book that I have coming out in October is How to Write Romantasy, and it's a step-by-step guide specific for romantasy authors. And we start again in this case, I start with defining romantasy because that's actually really confusing for a lot of people. There are a lot of different definitions of romantasy online, and I've seen people arguing in different forums, or like, romantasy is this, no, it's this, it's a subplot, no, it's a main plot in a fantasy setting, like. So the first thing I do is break it down, like, this is what romantasy is. These are the different romantasy, what are they called? Subgenres. These are the different, this is how romantasy relates to paranormal fiction. This is how romantasy relates to gaslamp fiction, just so everyone can at least have an idea of what they're getting into. Then I go through the idea phase, how to choose a marketable romantasy idea, because a lot of people who are getting into the genre are getting into it because it's so popular. So if that's the case, I talk about, hey, like, you may have your passion project, you may want to choose something that's on trend. This is how you can do both. This is how you can combine your passion with the trends. And then I walk through all the parts of creating a power couple that readers will root for, creating the fantasy world, all that good stuff, all the way through editing the book. And one thing I really wanted to focus on is a lot of people get into romantasy and think, okay, I'm just going to write a hot fairy guy and give him a six pack. and make him kiss someone, and that's it. And I really wanted to hammer home that, yeah, romantasy is really popular, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. There are steps to really making a power couple that readers root for and that make them addicted to that series where they just want to keep reading the next novel and the next novel and the next novel and then pretty much everything that the author writes. So that's what I focused on, is how you get that level of fandom from your romantasy novel.
I think it's wonderful that you're providing that because a lot of people will be attracted to writing and attracted to writing romantasy, but to be able to buy a book, presumably at $15 or whatever the equivalent is, to be able to do that without going on a $5,000 course, retreat somewhere to learn romantasy is wonderful because writing is something that everybody can get involved in, and it's a creative outlet and it taps into our desire to create, which is wonderful. And it's something that we can be proud of, that we can create. No matter how successful we are, we can create something to be proud of. So that's really good. I really appreciate your time. Is there any last thoughts you'd want to tell people about writing and about anything else you do, your website or anything else you do, so that people can find you and see what else you're working on, Jenna?
Oh, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure to be here. If anyone wants to find me, the Savior series, The Savior's Champion, and The Savior Sister, which are the first two books, they're available at all major retailers. So is Shut Up and Write the Book. Um, How to Write Romantasy is available for pre-order right now. And actually, we have a little pre-order gift going out. So if anyone pre-orders the copy, they can submit their proof of pre-order and receive a free digital workbook on how to craft a power couple. And you get that immediately. You don't have to wait for How to Write Romantasy to come out. So you can get the workbook and start working on it right away. All of that information is available on my website. It's also available on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Jenna Moreci. It's available on my Instagram, which is also at Jenna Moreci. So yeah, people can find me all over the place.
That's really good. I really appreciate your time today. It's been wonderful and inspiring. You're really inspiring, and I wish you all the best with the book and everything you're doing. You deserve all the luck and everything you're getting. And say hello to your husband. I hope he's well. And that was great. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you so much. That was so sweet. I really appreciate it.